Welcome to this episode of Men Who Understood the Times. I'm Michael, and we've got Josh and Andy here. And as we begin, as with a disclaimer of we're just three guys that are talking late at night on a Sunday evening with our drinks in hand. We're not speaking for our churches or for our church body or for our school. But Andy, you've got your sweatshirt as you're sitting outside in the 60 plus degree weather of Las Vegas. What are you drinking?
I've got the Stone Delicious Double IPA, only
Whoa.
9.4% alcohol by volume.
Wow. There you go. And and Josh, you're a lot colder there in Wisconsin, but what are you
Yeah,
drinking?
it was 70 here like 8 days ago, and now it's 24 and snowing. Um, Before I forget, by the way, Chicago is supposed to get between 1 and 3 feet of snow because there's a lake effect storm coming through, and so it's a bummer for those guys. I'm drinking. It's the Japanese whiskey. It's a Fukano Vault Reserve number two, and there's this little distillery in Fukano, Japan, and they do like 4,000 bottle runs of experimental chemistries, and that's it. And so you can't get this anymore. Like I've looked online, it's $60 a bottle, and now it's like 600 because there are two of them left or whatever. So I'm enjoying this. It's very good.
Well,
How
I'm
about
just
you?
laughing. Well, that's fantastic. And I'm laughing your description of Chicago getting all that snow because several weeks ago we had several inches of snow, but it's Wyoming, so it all melted by late afternoon and blew away. And it's 30 degrees, and so I'm out on the side by side after church, just hanging around. Uh, and so my drink, and you can't get this anywhere either because this is made by my good friend Dustin Burgundy in Bristol, Wisconsin. It is Cherry Bounce.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Uh, so before we talk about our topic, we want to talk about how big the last topic was. It was our second largest episode after the Thank God for Charlie Kirk, as we talked about abortion and euthanasia, entitled Opposing Satan's Sacrament. It was well over 1,000 views within 6 days. And one of the things that the three of us have been talking about this past week is there have been a few people that have reached out to us about possibly funding this ministry for, with so that we can have better microphones, maybe advertising, because we are definitely reaching a need here uh, with what we're talking about in these podcasts. And maybe even if the funds are there to be able to send one or all of us to conferences or to host a conference or something like that. So uh, I'll be sharing some of that information in the links for YouTube and then putting it on at the end of our podcast as we get going with this. And I don't know if you guys know this, but with YouTube, that you need 1,000 subscribers and then you can start monetizing it and having advertising. So we are only 840 subscribers short. So
But well on our way.
yes, yeah, I mean, that's 160 subscribers in like 2 weeks. So we want to encourage people, like we do say at the end, keep liking, sharing, subscribing. So today we're going to be talking about the SNAP program. Uh, so what is SNAP? Well, uh, so here's the background on it. That there's a scenario that picture this: you're a farmer with a lot of extra corn. But people can't afford your corn, so they go to the soup kitchen instead, and you have to throw away the excess cobs. That was the scenario that prompted the US's first food stamp program during the Great Depression. The government issued stamps to the poor, which they could exchange for surplus commodities. 2 decades later, the 1964 Food Stamp Act made the program permanent, and in 2008, it was renamed SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. I was surprised that, you know, how many people are on the SNAP program. And this all came about because of the government shutdown. And then at the beginning of November, that people were going to go without their SNAP benefits. Did you guys know how many people were on SNAP?
I did not know it was 40 whatever million.
42
Um,
million recipients of SNAP every month. That's 1 in 8 U.S. residents. Uh, so the average SNAP benefit is $187 a month per person, and we can be spent on certain groceries and non-alcoholic beverages. And then there's eligibility requirements and so forth. But Andy, what are the benefits of programs like this, like SNAP and other programs run by the government? Because we'll talk about church-run things later on, but other programs for welfare run by the government for its citizens.
To begin with, to your initial point, isn't it, did you say 43 million total?
42 million, yeah.
40, yeah. And isn't that up just in the last 5 years from what, 17 or 18 million? So that's a pretty dramatic increase. So I'll speak to maybe a positive point, but I'm going to throw in a little bit of negative too. The
Yeah, we're going to get
positive
to the
is,
negative in a little bit. Yeah.
okay, fair enough, fair enough.
Yeah.
So the positive is that the Lord nurtures within family and responds to the answers the needs of individuals within families for spiritual and their bodily welfare. Whereas in the church, the primary provision is the spiritual provision, right? And in government, the primary provision is bodily welfare, security, peace, structure in society and life. And so within every society, there will be the impoverished, there will be the needy. And so, to the degree that a government answers the needs of the needy by providing for their bodily welfare, that is fulfilling a God given responsibility to them.
Okay. Josh, what do you see as the benefits of programs like this for the government?
I mean, there are a lot of people that I know who have benefited from this in a positive way when they had a death in the family, uh, something happened, some circumstance as a consequence of living in a fallen world, where this was the life raft that got them through. And I think I would qualify in a positive way with it being a bridge between point A and point B of being financially sustainable on one's own. I don't think it's a good situation when SNAP or whatever other kind of welfare benefit becomes a way of life or a means of living. And so, but it certainly has helped many people who are destitute for whatever reason get back on their feet.
Yeah, and I was talking about this with my wife Shelley because I told her we were going to be talking about this issue, and when she and I were first married and living in Radcliffe, Kentucky, we were on the WIC program, Women, Infant, and Children, and she remembered exactly what we got from that. It was milk and cheese, cereal, eggs, carrots. That's about it. Okay. But it was like you guys were saying, it was that bridge to be able to go from,
Mhm.
hey, to be able to help our family as it was growing. And then she said, yeah, we were on it probably a little bit when we were in Wisconsin too. When we moved 8 years later, we had three young girls and then another one on the way. But God blessed us so that, yeah, we don't need that anymore. So, Andy, what about the negatives of a government program like this?
Well, for a government proactively, if when a program or when programs like these are abused, a lot of times it's connected with a government initiative to create more dependence and to further dependency so that what happens then for people many times I would think it's unwitting is that they begin to rely on the government as a sort of idol to provide the kind of security and the kind of peace that only God can provide. And what I mean by that is not necessarily always immediately or directly, but indirectly through your abilities, through your intelligence, through your availability, through the living out of your daily life, right? The Lord provides for us through work and through active and proactive initiative. So the negative I see tangibly is a government who would abuse programs like these to create more dependence. And then what happens negatively for people is that they begin to look to government for things that really they should be relying on from God.
Yeah. And I ask you the same question, Josh, that's kind of exactly as the timing is there too. I noticed the irony, and I think a lot of people did, that just a few weeks ago, we had a whole bunch of people that were out in the streets protesting no kings, calling Trump a fascist. And then what was happening just before November 1st? Then they were really saying, hey, king, give us some food. Okay. It can't be both ways. And yet that's what happens in our diseased minds where we don't see things both ways. Uh, and I think another problem is with this, and you touched on it, Andy, as you were saying, that's not that 42 million. That's ballooned just recently. Well, what happened? And I think a big part of what happened is that a lot of people have been put onto these welfare type programs that don't deserve it. Okay. And then what happens to the faithful, hardworking people who are supporting it through their taxes is it makes everything so much more expensive because the SNAP program and other programs like that. Notice what has happened to our food prices in the grocery stores in the last few years. It's ballooned. And so now the people that they want to be able to help, but they can't because they're hardworking citizens and so much of their money is being drained and going to other people. So that's one of the things I wanted to bring up. What else do you have, Josh, for the difficulty and problems with the government programs like this?
Well, I'd be concerned about the replacement of the father figure in the family, and I know that one of the things that I've had the privilege of doing is working in the inner city of Milwaukee, both on Milwaukee's predominantly black north side and also on the mostly Hispanic and Hmong south side. And in both cases, women are incentivized to not get married because of these programs. Um, I've run into mothers who told me flat out that um, efficacy in the classroom was unnecessary because their daughter was going to be on the system. And to truncate that story, um, girls are sometimes farmed out for the sake of being able to contribute to the family for benefits by getting pregnant at the age of 15 or 16. And so those are definitely problems with the system. And so this has decimated the family in the 53206 zip code in Milwaukee, where if you are an African American child in that zip code, there's an 80% chance even of a father figure in your life. So that's a huge problem. Additionally, um, and I don't want to steal your thunder because I think you're going to talk about passages later on,
Yep.
okay, and how they're contorted. Um, but the Bible commands you as an individual to help other people. Um, and so I'm looking at the Cato Institute on my laptop right now. And in 2019, we were spending $63 billion, 63 billion with a B. That money has to be taken from people who are working so that it can be given to those who are either destitute, but in many cases are not working. And that has ballooned to 145 billion. So it's more than doubled since 2019. Um, and again, that money is taken with the threat of force behind it. And so I was talking to a parent at a cross country meet. You're standing around waiting for your kids to come around the bend. Again, we were talking about this, and she was coming from a left wing perspective. I'm coming from a more conservative perspective. And I said, can we find some common ground on this? I think we're attacking the same problems. Like, I don't like to see hungry people who are in need, neither do you. And I don't like to see um, all of these social issues. But when I think about how I would attack this problem, I would say it's a person's choice. It's a volitional problem. So I would say, well, maybe I can raise money for a food pantry or whatever else, or maybe I could just open up my checkbook and write a check or whatever else. But I'm choosing to do that. And if there's some other thing that I care about that I can't convince a person to help with, well, okay, let's see what we can do with people who do want to help. And I say, now, my issue with your position is that it concerns me how comfortable you are with violence. She was really taken aback. She's like, well, I'm not okay with violence. I said, really? Well, here's the thing. To use this number, $145 billion has to come from people who are working. And let's pressure test that argument. What if I don't want to pay that? What if I don't think it's reasonable? What happens to me if I don't pay my taxes? Is, eventually there's an arrest warrant, and then men with guns show up and use the threat of force or actual force to coerce me into paying. And so if you can distinguish that from theft, that that's a fun semantical argument or exercise to have. But there's a lot that's wrong with this program, and at this point, I think it's doing a lot more harm than good.
Well, and Josh, to your point, it's like, what would happen to a person who refuses to work? Because they wouldn't get threatened the same way. You wouldn't go and compel them and twist their arm to get a job, would you? In fact, to the degree that you're talking about it, people are incentivized to not work.
You know what's interesting? I was at a educational symposium probably 12 years ago, and the topic of conversation was how can we as Americans compete with the Asian educational markets? Because at the time, I don't know what the current stats are, but at the time, the U.S. is ranked like 26th in math, and then China, Korea, South Korea, and Japan were 1, 2, and 3 at whatever year that was. Um, and I was just sort of dispassionately watching this, and somebody knew that I had done mission work in Beijing and lived there. They're like, well, Josh, you lived in Beijing for a whole year. Like, what do you think? And I kind of glanced up and said, you can't catch them. Like, well, come on now. Like, why not? Like, our whole culture just isn't designed for that kind of traction. Like, what do you mean? And I said, okay. I taught at a school called Beida Fuzhong, which in Mandarin means the Integrated School of Beijing University. There were 4,000 students. I was never the first one there. Like, I tried. I go like 6 o'clock in the morning to prep my lessons. I was never the last one there. There were constantly kids who were incredibly self-disciplined and motivated in studying because when I lived there 23, 4 years ago, whatever that was, there were 200 million school-age children. So you got into one of the upper echelon schools, like the one that I taught for, which was the feeder school for the analog would be Harvard here. If you made a mistake, you were done. You were a peasant. That was it. And so, what's the worst case scenario? Is you fail a test and you're out. That's it. You blew your one chance at not being like a migrant worker or a peasant. What's the worst case scenario in Milwaukee? I mean, you have an Obama phone, you've got government housing, you've got heat assistance, you've got SNAP and EBT. You can get basic
Government
cable.
healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a good existence. It's subsistence living, but I mean, you can keep your own hours, I guess, and there's, at least the illusion of freedom. And so we've removed all of the incentives for not making bad decisions, in particular when it comes to sexual proclivities. And so again, I don't think this is a good thing overall.
Yeah, and so we're going to lead into some of that too. So this week in prepping for this episode, I was watching a PragerU video. It's a great 30-minute video with Xavier, a young black man who was reacting to shocking viral videos that were showing people losing it online after reports that they were going to be losing their SNAP benefits. And so I encourage people to go ahead and watch that because he reacts to every one of these people who are reacting to losing their benefits. Uh, from that and other articles I've read, people are spending recklessly. They're not saving. It's what both of you guys are saying. It's because they have this safety net to fall on. They're not saving their money. Uh, they just know that the politicians are going to give them money. Uh, there's one on that video that said, taxpayers' responsibility is to take care of my babies. Is what you were saying, Josh. No, that's your dad. That's the father of your children. This is a lady, a young lady too, who had 7 children. She said it on the video. I have 7 babies with 7 baby daddies. Okay. That is not responsible. That is not teaching responsibility. Uh, on the video, I saw a guy who was complaining that he wasn't getting his EBT card. So he said, I don't work for anybody. No one is the boss of me. He's a dad of 2. He's not working. He's just expecting the government to give him money. And then as you really dig into this, and this is what I was referring to earlier, is that there has to be a lot of fraud involved in this. And states don't want to open this up and allow people to look at it to find the fraud because again, people are selling their food stamps that in Illinois, you can get a link card for $300 and then they can go and sell that $300 link card for $200 in cash so that someone else can go use the link card and get $300 of groceries. But now this person who didn't need the food, they have $200 of cash and they can do that over and over again. Or there's other videos of people that are using their government benefits and then they're going and buying food, but then they're taking it and shipping it down to Mexico and then they're making money on they're making profit on what you and I as tax collector or as taxpayers are giving to the government for this. Some other background. The Food Stamp Act, I'll talk about that in a little bit because here I want to lead Andy into talking about communism because what we're seeing with these 42 million people, that a lot of them are relying on the government to meet their basic needs. That's a system that's dangerous because the same government that says they're going to feed you is the same government that says we're not going to feed you. And when that's the case, then you're not free. Then you're controlled. Then self-reliance isn't about independence, it's about survival. So this is where I want you to talk about the socialism and communism here because they can starve you. They make you dependent and compliable. And then one last thing is a quote I found from Thomas Sowell. Maybe Josh, you sent this to me. He said, "You cannot subsidize irresponsibility and expect people to become more responsible." And yet that's what we're doing with some of these programs. So go ahead and talk maybe about the socialism and communism that can develop with programs like this, Andy.
Well, the government likes to not only seize the means of production, but to seize the people's freedom to produce. And so, to the degree that you make more dependence or foster more dependence through not just fraudulent programs like these or programs that are susceptible to fraud, but programs that, because they're human, are poorly stewarded. I mean, maybe it's a valid program, like perhaps maybe there's a work requirement involved, say. Well, meanwhile, they open up the goods that are able to be procured underneath a program to include things like alcohol or cigarettes or very very unhealthy foods, and so it just exacerbates the problem to a great extent. It's kind of like in the process of trying to diminish one problem or even cure one problem, you see a drastic and dramatic rise in other problems. And so there's just no pure and pristine way. Now, with regard to socialism and communism, I think that's just it. When they not only seize the rights of production, but there are alternate ways where they can disincentivize people to produce, and both end up creating drones essentially who rely on the government rather than God. Now, the only thing I would add that's connected to this, not exactly related to the socialism and communism thing, but yet it is in Revelation, where you've got the beast coming out of the sea and you've got the beast of the earth. The idea of this gargantuan behemoth entity that includes human authority in opposition to the gospel. It is so intimidating that you, you fall prey to it because you know that the result of not abiding these human authorities, even though they oppose the gospel and the word of God, the alternative is an even greater risk. Say, so let me give you an example, or a connected example to the beast coming out of the earth. People abide false teaching of work righteousness because they're not aware of, or they disobey the alternatives. The point being that you you grow so dependent upon this behemoth government, or even in the alternate case of false doctrine, that you begin to build your life around the way the government provides for you, instead of building your life away the way around the way the Lord has promised to provide for you through the Word of God and through the body and life and time on earth that He has given you. So you it just becomes essentially a strong and persuasive idol that consumes your life and your focus.
And then, Josh, before you talk on that, so I don't know if you guys remember, this was maybe a year or two ago when a guy named Oliver Anthony became famous with his song Rich Men North of Richmond. And one of the lines from that song came to mind as I was again studying for this episode. He wrote and sang, "If you are 5'3" and you're 300 pounds, taxes ought not to pay for your bags of fudge rounds." Okay, it's not a real loving way of putting it, but you know, I think there is some truth to that because you were kind of touching on this, Andy, is part of the problem with the EBT cards and the SNAP benefits and so forth. Very different from when Shelly and I were on WIC. We had to buy healthy stuff, milk, juice, eggs, and so forth. Fantastic. That's not what you can buy with these things. And again, if people disagree, all you have to do is go online. People are more than happy to share on their TikTok videos the kind of junk food, the processed food, and so forth that is super unhealthy that they're getting in these benefits. Places like Coca-Cola and so forth are funding this. Again, I listened to a podcast where they talked about this, that I'm not going to name the company, but it's a very well-known and very large company that pays their employees a lower amount than they really should. And then, but they right away with their income, when they hire them, they tell them how to get on SNAP benefits. Why? Because people will use their SNAP benefits in their stores. Okay, so it's a vicious cycle. And then there are big companies like maybe Nabisco and Coca-Cola and all of these other ones that have all these processed and sugary foods. They are lobbying our congressmen and senators to keep these kinds of things in there. So then people become overweight and unhealthy, which creates other problems down the line of diabetes and so forth. And then that's increasing the insurance and so forth.
Well,
So,
and to that point,
yep.
Mike, to that point, it's not just increase. You're because then you don't just have the individual working citizens sponsoring your company by buying your product, but you also have the government sponsoring your company because they are relying on your product, and therefore your stock price doubles because you got the contract.
Yeah. S- Go ahead, Josh. What do you want to say about this topic?
Well, first of all, the notion that we're only paying for one thing is a little bit dubious when you're being given money, um, as opposed to like WIC. My parents were on WIC too in the 1980s, and up until our church heard that we were receiving WIC, and then our church stepped in and did what churches were supposed to do, and then we were very quickly off of that. But so a fun word is fungible. Money is fungible. The notion that we're going to give you SNAP benefits that are only to be used for consumable goods. I was reading an article, I just closed it, I had it up a second ago, about the indirect impact of EBT and SNAP benefits being cut on urban nail salons. And so and part of the videos that you mentioned earlier, Mike, were people who were really upset because they don't have money to um to get their hair and nails done. Or I saw one guy saying like, "This is cutting into my weed money. I got to buy food though," and it's like, well, yeah, yes, that's correct. So um, we are enabling the purchase of food with these programs so that this frees up other money, which then can be spent on other things. And um, the hair and nails thing is it's really hard to say like, well, I should have money taken out of my paycheck so that I mean indirectly that nails can be done. That doesn't sit well at all. And the other part of the Marxist plan is the that entire program, socialism, communism. They hate Christianity because in Christianity, the state cannot become God. And that is the ultimate goal with all of these, get more people dependent, get more people hooked and relying on it. And so, the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away, the name of the Lord be praised is replaced with, well, the government gave me these programs and now they're cut for a while. And so I'll just be content. I'll wait patiently for the government to fix itself so that it can take care of me again, as opposed to being responsible, um, a responsible citizen, which is healthier for that individual person. You are enabling a lot of really, really bad behavior. In every national park I've been to, there are signs saying, please don't feed the wild animals because they will become habituated to taking food from humans. They will stop hunting and gathering food of their own. And then when you leave for the winter, they die. You're going to kill them. How are we not doing something very similar to that? And I'm not referring to anybody as an animal, but you get the analogy, right? We're
It's
doing this. Go ahead.
Well, it just ties in with that friend enemy distinction too, because then the government political party is not just in pursuit of power, but of worship to an extent, maybe though it would never be called that, right? Because if you're the party that furnishes these fungible assets and the products that they procure, then you are to an extent God. But
Mhm.
anyone who is against it or anyone who wants to modify, change, alter, or even um, you know shrink the program
You don't want
is the
urban children to eat.
is the devil, right? Not just a disagreeing politician anymore, but the devil himself or herself.
Yeah. And and that's a good word to use, Josh, enabling. And that's kind of the issue is it's the same thing we talked about when the episode of the sin of empathy is that
Mhm.
when we're not willing to speak to people about whatever that sin is, we are enabling them to continue in that sin. As a pastor, I've ministered to people when they're addicted to something, whether it's drugs or alcohol or pornography or something else. And when you don't say anything, you just enable. I've talked to parents trying to figure out, how do I talk to my child who thinks that she's gay? How do I talk to my spouse who is an alcoholic, but I don't want to upset them or so forth? Well, you're just enabling them. And
Mhm.
that's kind of what we're talking about here is our government is enabling that. Maybe it started as a good thing, but you talked about it, Andy. It is scriptural, Revelation 13, of the beast out of the sea, the government, that people are going to worship it. That's where they're getting their benefits from, not from Jesus Christ, not from the hard work of a sanctified worker. And then the other thing is, it causes good, hardworking people that want to help. It makes them, when they see these videos and so forth, and they learn about all of the abuses, then it makes them resentful and
Mhm.
angry and unwilling to help. And then now you have the devil working on them this way. So for the last part of this episode, now that we've identified that there's problems, let's work at some better alternatives, because it's good for people who are listening and watching this. I think it's good for them to get upset. We should get upset when we see issues. But the problem is, we often get upset and then we become lukewarm. We just don't do anything. We need to get upset and then do something about it. Find a better alternative. So again, some little history on this. The Food Stamp Act was signed into law in 1964. Around the same exact time, we saw a shift from scratch cooked meals to TV dinners and microwaves. Gardens were replaced with manicured lawns, and family farms began to vanish as corporate farms took their place. The experts claimed, don't preserve your own food. You'll get sick. Buy this soup in a can instead. And in only a few decades, they built a nation that cannot eat unless the government says so. This is our wake up call. So, uh, when Shelly and I were living in Racine, the last number of years, we were kind of prepping. We had a huge garden. We raised meat chickens and then chickens for eggs that we did a lot of canning. We had a huge canning cellar and so forth. And I had taken a video and then I shared it, a Snapchat video, with a friend of mine. He he commented, "Don't you trust Jesus?" And I said, "Yes, I trust Jesus, but I'm also trying to be prepared for emergencies. That we want food security. We're trying because we understand all it takes is for the power to go out for a few days, for the government to shut down for a certain amount of time, for anything to happen. All of a sudden, we are not set up in our nation. There's going to be food insecurity. So it's good for us to prep in a certain way. So what might be some better ways, Andy, for us to deal with this? And maybe we can, as we talk about better ways, look at some Bible verses. So Leviticus 19 is one that came to mind. Uh, Leviticus 19 verses 9 and 10. When you reap the harvest from your land, you are not to finish reaping all the ways to the edge of the field. Do not gather up the gleanings of your harvest. Do not strip your vineyards clean, and do not pick up the fallen grapes from your vineyard, but leave them for the poor and the alien who live with you. I am the Lord your God. And when I was looking at that verse, I was thinking of Ruth. Ruth with her mother-in-law, that they're destitute. There's no men left in their lives to take care of them. But God had set up this rule that if you're a foreigner, a widow, and so forth, you could come into a Jewish person's field and then glean from them. And she's led to go to the field of Boaz, her kinsman redeemer, and then she's able to glean extra. He leaves extra, but the key is, it's not a government handout. She has to do the work. There is not a sinful pride, but a good pride of, I'm doing something, I'm getting something for it. It's work. So, what are your ideas, Andy, on what could be better on these programs?
Well, just an aside
Hmm.
that as you read through Old Testament books like that, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy to an extent, you just marvel at the good and gracious governance of God. He leaves no stone unturned, and no uh, he leaves no detail unaddressed. As for how our government could do it better, I'd have to think about that a little bit. But I think things that we could begin with are the government could work at programmatically incentivizing strong families to a much greater extent than they ever have. In fact, well, that would of course involve wholesale change, wouldn't it, to current structures and current programs. Um, the government could also, well, which I think they might do to an extent, but um, you know, job referral programs, work incentive connections to some of these welfare programs. Those would be very, very healthy and good. And churches, I think, to some degree, without making this their social gospel mission, making that mistake, because of course the gospel is our number one goal to get that out there, but never to the exclusion or avoidance of these other needs of our neighbors either. So perhaps at the local level within our churches, we could do things like putting together little booklets in our church family where you have employers or you have even managers and those that could potentially consider potential job opportunities could have those centralized in a booklet or a brochure that we could share with those, even from our community, not just our church family, when they knock on our door or when we interact or witness with them. The church, of course, can work overtime at trying to strengthen families and to counsel marriages and to support uh, working families. And then just one other idea, well, a connected point here. Churches that do strive to do this, I think you'll find one of the realities nowadays is that it's very difficult for churches who have a heart to do this to find opportunities in their community where they can support these kind of programs or institutions, like, for example, a food bank, that are not politically intoned or otherwise spiritually intoned in such a way where it might betray what we believe. So that is one of the hard things to discern, is whether or not there's ways that we can do it without compromising our confession or giving the wrong impression to our community. As one example, here in Las Vegas, there's an organization called the Serving Our Kids Foundation, and they simply collect food donations for kids who go home to houses that may not have a pantry or have pantries that are underfurnished and undersupplied. And so twice a year, usually around this time, and then also in the springtime leading up to Easter or shortly thereafter, we have volunteers that we order paper bags on Amazon. We put a little flyer on there with some information about our church and what we're trying to do to support the Serving Our Kids Foundation. And we simply hang those paper bags on doors around the community. And then a week later, or sometimes 2 weeks later, we come by and we give them a day and time where we're going to come by and collect whatever they were willing to donate. And then, of course, we take that up to the the Serving Our Kids Foundation. So is it making a dent in Las Vegas underprivileged population? I don't know. I doubt it. And yet it is a fulfilling purpose and cause that we can participate in as a church family.
Yeah. A couple of things too is one of the verses that come to mind is Jesus said, St. Paul said to the Thessalonians, if a man shall not work, he shall not eat. Okay. I think that's really encouraging people is, yeah, we want to help, and we're going to look at some Bible verses of that we are called by God to help. But it can't always just be a handout because then people become addicted to the handouts. They want to have some kind of self-worth. So working with it. Uh, One of the things I've done it several times, like you've talked about, Andy, of canvassing for food next August when our Casper College students, just before they come to school, right around our church, because we're like 2 miles from our church is 2 miles from the college. There's a number of homes in there, several hundred homes that we're going to canvass, collecting food for the students, and so it helps the community because they're doing something for their college students. It is helping us as a congregation get the word out, but it's definitely helping these students because a college student, they need help. I saw this on Facebook the other day from our Wisconsin Lutheran Seminary site. A huge thank you to all those across the state of Michigan who donated to our food pantry. The moving truck makes multiple stops throughout Michigan on its way to Mequon, Wisconsin. You can read more about this generous annual donation in an article written by Pastor William Brassow in November 2024. And then there's a link to the seminary site. Those are ways that we can help. You talked about too, it has to be wholesale government changes because right now, and Josh talked about this earlier, there are benefits for being unmarried and having lots of kids. I remember uh, well over a decade ago, I was taking a young couple through pre-marriage counseling, and they said, kind of whispered to me, "Hey, Pastor, uh, can you marry us secretly?" So, what are you talking about? And it was because she was a college student. And if she was married, she was going to lose her scholarships and her benefits and so forth. And I said, no, I can't do that. You have to be married legally and in the eyes of God. But it was a temptation for her. In the same way, I've had students that have asked their parents, Dad, can I say that I'm gay? Just to be able to get all the benefits because as a white straight male, he wasn't going to get a lot of benefits going to college. Uh, and so I would really encourage our the listeners, all of us as Christians, my big thing is we've got to have lower taxes. Talk to your representatives. Somehow we lower our taxes so that we can do this kind of work and then really encourage our government, state and federal, to do things like instead of benefits for single moms, do benefits for being married and having kids. Look at Hungary. I just pulled this up that uh, Hungary offers significant tax benefits for women with four or more children, including lifetime income tax exemption. Our birth rate is way low all across the world, especially in America. What does that do when you, as a government, incentivize people, be married, stay married, have children? Uh, Josh, I've got a couple of Bible verses for you to respond to. So Galatians 6, Paul writes, "Let us not get tired of doing good, for we will reap at the proper time if we don't give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us work for the good of all, especially for those who belong to the household of faith." And then James writes, "Suppose a brother or a sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and well fed,' but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead." So, what do those verses have to say to us as Christians in helping out the poor and needy?
Well, first of all, I was just thinking here in my notes, we should do a larger podcast just on the topic of socialism itself. And is this a thing that Christians should embrace? I've seen bumper stickers saying that Jesus was a socialist. And there's just a whole lot of specious bumper sticker dime store theology floating around out there that could be responded to. And I've never heard them taken apart in church. And so I think that's kind of like our shtick at this point. Um, I'd like to go for a second to speaking of misapplied scripture. So
Yeah.
those two passages you just said. Also, I've seen the rationale for incredibly high taxes so that we can give $145 billion to the SNAP program. And the rationale for the liberal Christian would be from Matthew 25, verses 40 through 45. "Then he will say to those that is left, 'Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink.'" So you have that passage saying, "Whatever you did for the least of one of these, you did for me," as a rationale for what amounts to socialism, where we find nobility in taking from those whom we perceive to be rich and giving to those who are in need. And we feel virtuous in doing that. So here's the problem with that. Um, it's the word you. That's God talking to you as an individual and to me as an individual. Whatever you did for one of the least of these, you did for me. Not having the government come in and under compulsion at the threat of force remove part of your paycheck without your consent. Um, and another one here, there's an element because Paul talks in Second Corinthians chapter 10, verse 6. Remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Each man should give what he has decided in his heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And so that entire component of compulsion not being part of the equation here, this is what you can do. And there's been seasons of my life with Erica as a married couple where we've had money available to help, and so we gave money. Or like this past year, we had these terrible floods in the Milwaukee area, and I had just spent a mint starting an LLC, took out a huge loan to buy like an old dump truck, but then I have an old dump truck and people are cleaning out their basements. And so I just went around saying, hey, fill it up. Let's go to the dump. Um, and I'm good with my hands. And so um, the the amount of money that it would cost to replace a water heater um, during that flooded time where plumbers were getting between $2,000 and $3,000 to swap out a water heater. And you don't think about it, but like that's a huge thing for a family that has no power, no air conditioning. Then the power comes back on, but you have ice cold water because your water heater was underwater itself, and if it's gas, you can't repair that. You have to replace the whole thing. And so I just went around replacing water heaters. It's like, hey, if you buy the same one, and like I don't need to move the gas lines, we'll just swap it out, and it's going to cost you like $800 for a new one. Um, and I'm not going to charge anybody for that. And so there's ways you can help. There's ways we can help as individuals because the Bible says that you are the one who is doing this, not the government on your behalf, and maybe in ways that are insanely wasteful and also deleterious to the people that you're supposed to be helping because it's enabling them to have bad behavior. And and so yeah, there's a lot of things that we as Christians can do.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different Bible verses I had written down. We're not going to have the time to go through all of them, but you're right that people are going to use these Bible verses as clubs to say you have to do this. Uh, the same Bible verse you quoted, Josh, there's one I had written down from Matthew 25 that Cowboy State Daily, a Wyoming online paper, uh, two people from both political parties use that same verse to be able to say one is we have to have the SNAP benefit, and someone else saying we don't need the SNAP benefit, we need to have Christians doing this. Because you're right, nowhere does scripture say the government has this responsibility. It is us as Christians and as churches, we have handed this responsibility over to the government. Part of it maybe the government's taken the responsibility from us because like I said before, we don't have the funds to be able to do this, so we need the lower taxes, but we've also willingly given it over and say, "Oh, that's the government's job. And therefore now I can wash my hands. I don't have to think of it." No, even if the government's still doing it, it is still our responsibility to do it, but not to be made to feel guilty to do this. That's not right. That's not the proper motivation. It is our loving thing to do. Uh, I was at a food pantry this last week, and a guy that was a couple rows in front of me, but people talk loudly. And he wasn't bragging, but he said, "Yeah, I was over at Sam's Club, and I bought them out of hot dogs and buns to be able to feed the hungry. And now I'm on my way over to Costco to buy them out of hot dogs and buns." Yeah, that's what we do. That's what we do as Christians. That when we've had people that have come to the church for food pantry, and I'm new to the church, we don't have any food or anything like that. We don't have room for things. So what do? Here's a gift card. I'll take you over there. I'll buy you some food or I'll take you out to a restaurant. The problem is I've also been refused because that's not what they really want. They want the cash to be able to do something else. So, anything else that you want to talk about with this issue as we're wrapping it up, Andy?
Well, by analogy, Las Vegas has over 30,000 homeless people. Where would you
Mm.
want to live if you had no regular access to food or shelter? Well, in a paradisical climate like the one we enjoy. And there's a lot that could be said about the needy in our community, for example. But two realities bear themselves. One is that there is a lot of addiction, there is a lot of mental health uh, at work here and at play. So some of the needs that people have are legitimate, aren't they? But the reason why, in our view, Christians being responsive and attendant to the needs of our neighbor, why we're so passionate about proclaiming that and urging and encouraging that, is because we do it without the naivety with which the government or unbelievers do it. We never do it assuming that we're going to cure it. We never do it as though this is the ultimate blessing that we're providing. We do it simply because of our love for Jesus and our love for our neighbor, because we've been provided for in the most ultimate way through his forgiveness for us. So it's, if you're looking for a cause and a purpose, and even to some degree a communal crusade to get behind, do so with regard to an issue like this one, trusting that, or remembering that you're never going to cure it, but trusting that you are fulfilling one of your callings that Christ has given you out of grace and opportunity and the blessing, and that's it.
And and Josh, what do you want to say to wrap this up?
I think I've said my my piece on this. And I mean, can't follow what Andy just said. So yeah,
All
you're here.
right, fantastic. All right. So, Andy, what are your two news sources?
Oh, I got two good ones for you guys today. Let me just pull it up here. First of all, maybe I've already mentioned this, so I apologize if it's a little redundant, but I really enjoy whatever Hillsdale College puts out through Imprimis. So if you're not a subscriber to that, you can sign up for it for free. It's a great read each time they send it out. I think it's quarterly, right? Maybe a little bit more frequently, but they also have good content online at imprimis.hillsdale.edu. So I highly recommend Imprimis. It's thoughtful, it's substantive, and frankly, a lot of times it aligns even too with our Christian faith, though it's not a Christian college or site or publication. The second one that was recommended to me by a close friend and classmate of both Josh's and mine is called thehighwire.com. Thehighwire.com. They they really focus on health, especially, but not only just health too. There's a lot of really good content on there about bodily stewardship, about living your Christian life with regard to, or for us who are Christians, living our lives with careful discernment about, you know, things like vaccines or things like healthcare or things like beginning of life or end of life issues.
Highwire.com.
Yep, thehighwire.com.
All right. And then for a note from a fan. So I'm sure this lady would have written the same thing to you guys, but she doesn't know you as well. So she wrote, I'm listening to the podcast right now. God bless your ministry, Pastor. If I can move to Wyoming and join your church and be part of that ministry to hurting people, I'd do that in a heartbeat. So I told her thank you. She can always come for a visit and that there's plenty of room in Wyoming because no one lives here. Uh, and I've also been told,
Yet,
Yeah, well, I've also been told, Pastor, quit putting so many good things about Wyoming on social media because we don't want people to move here. I said, well, I want God to grow this church, and we need people to move here to to have people to grow the church.
Here you
Uh,
go, Mike.
yeah,
It's likely that the New York transplants are coming. Just wait.
there you go. Uh, and then uh, to continue to like, share, subscribe. Again, like I said before, we only need another 840 subscribers on YouTube to monetize it. So maybe some people that want to advertise on us on their podcasts, maybe some whiskey or beer or something, so that that can be advertised along with what we're drinking. And then I wanted to end with this Bible verse from Matthew 26, verse 11. And it's a good reminder of what Andy said too. We're talking about the poor, but the key is Jesus is going to say in this verse, the poor all will always have with us. Everything that we want to do as individual Christians and then as churches in helping out the poor. Whether it's a food pantry, a clothing pantry, a diaper drive, uh, whatever it is, it's always to help them out because we're called to do that, but also, Lord willing, so that we not just open our hearts and our hands and our wallets, but open our mouths so that we can talk about Jesus, that He is the cure for their sicknesses. He is the one who's going to give the riches to their spiritual poverty. That though they may have not much of a home here, that Jesus has provided them an eternal home. And that's always our ultimate goal, is to be able to lead them to Jesus. And he says that. He said, the poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. And so we want to always point people to Jesus. And that's the goal of what we're talking about in these podcasts. Lord's blessings until next week.